long because it sometimes it slows down people's computers. So welcome to my webinar, How to Integrate Art History into Your Curriculum. My name is Cindy Ingram, and I am excited that you are here. I think everyone else can hear me. Oh, no sound from the timer. Okay, good. Yeah, it was played on my computer, so it probably didn't make it all the way to the microphone. So yes, I am very happy you're here. This is chock full of stuff. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to click away from my face just so you know who you're talking to. Okay, turn microphone. No, I don't want to turn microphone off because sometimes I do that. And then I just talk for 5 minutes and they're like, load a poll, and that is which option best describes you? So that should have popped up in place of your chat. Go ahead and click which of those options represent you. And I know that I couldn't make an option for everybody because there are thousands and millions of different types of art educators. And so you got to stop somewhere on the list. So good. We have a good mix, it looks like, of all the different grades. And then we have some homeschoolers and other as well. So I know I have a lot of museum educators and grandparents and other types of people who are my readers. So that's awesome. We have a good mix of people. Now this will have enough content for everyone. So we're covering sort of strategies for all the different grade levels. So don't worry if you think I'm just only going to talk about one grade. I'm going to talk about a lot. So, yes. Oh yeah. And you know what? There's K-8 and there's, oh my gosh, 1 through 12. My school has K through 10 and they wanted to hire a K through 8 art teacher, but neither of the people that they interviewed were willing to do that. So they just hired us both. And I got the upper grades and she got the lower grades. So it was kind of funny. Like she was like, no, I don't want to do middle school. And I was like, no, I don't want to do elementary, which is funny. I used to teach elementary. I just don't really want to do it anymore. So awesome. Well, welcome. If that poll is still there, you can click the little orange button that says close poll. That'll get it off your screen if it's blocking the chat for some reason. So let me introduce myself. My name is Cindy Ingram. And if you don't know me already, you already saw my face, but I run the website artcuratorforkids.com. And I have a BA in art history from the University of Texas, a master's in art education. And I used to work in museums and nonprofits out of college doing teacher professional development, teacher programs, and then also gallery teaching in museums. So I taught a lot in museums. And then I had gotten laid off from a job and I started teaching elementary, and I just really fell in love with taking the stuff that I did in the museum and then using it actually in the classroom. So I've taught 4 years of community college, which I did at the same time as teaching or working in the museums. And then I have taught 2 years as an elementary art teacher, 5 years teaching online middle and high school. And then I currently teach middle and high school. This will be my second year at my school coming up this year. So I've taught a wide variety of ages. And so, and most of my strategies that I use work just as well at elementary as they do at community college. It's pretty amazing. A lot of these art education methods and discussion methods are kind of universal, which is really fun. So I started my website about 3.5 years ago, and it is the Art Curator for Kids. And I used to constantly be Googling things like how to teach Renaissance art in a creative way, or what are some examples of artworks that use line or whatever. And I could never find anything. And it was just really frustrating for me because I wanted to teach art in a certain way and I just couldn't find resources. So I kind of had to develop my own. And then, about 3.5 years ago, I was like, you know what? I am constantly envisioning this website that has all this stuff that I'm constantly Googling. I'm like, why don't I just create it? So that's why I started my website. So it has really grown over the last 3.5 years, and it's just really wonderful. And I don't really call it the Art Curator for Kids anymore, mainly because a lot of my stuff is for upper grades, and the kids thing kind of turns people away because they think it's just for little kids, which it's not. So I'm slowly rebranding away from the Art Creator for Kids, even though it's the best name ever and I love it, and it's part of me. But and one of my students this year saw the Art Creator for Kids on one of my PowerPoints, and she was like, "We're not kids, miss." I was like, "Yes, you are. Yes, you are. You're in 8th grade. You're still a kid." Okay, but I understand what you're coming from. Okay, so what I want you to do in the chat box below is to answer the question that's on the screen. Why is it important to look at art in addition to making art? And what do students learn from doing that? So go ahead and share your thoughts in the chat. And my whole view on my website is that I really focus on art appreciation, art history, and learning from actual works of art, because on the internet, there's lots and lots of projects, and we've got Pinterest and we've got some amazing bloggers who really focus on projects. And mine is, I think we need to do more than just, make art. We need to spend some good quality time looking at art. So, let me know why it's important to look at art in addition to making it. I love what Marianne says here is she wants her students to find comparisons to artwork and artists of the past with their current lives. And that is awesome because, I'm going to go back up to a an earlier slide, which I didn't tell the story. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, sometimes I forget. But, this painting on the screen, Picasso's Girl Before a Mirror, was like a catalyst to change my life. I was applying for a PhD in art history at the time. I saw this painting in an exhibit in 2004, and it blew me away. I started crying, I couldn't walk away from it. And at that moment, I realized I didn't want art to lose the magic. So I changed my whole course of my career. I did art education instead of art history. And who knows, where I would have gone had I not made that decision. And this art was like the piece, and this art will always be a part of who I am. So, making those connections and finding something that they can really connect to, I think is super important. Misty says to find inspiration and new ideas, and then just to see the course of history, how art has developed. And I love, connecting to all of history, because when you can place something in history and you understand sort of the scope of what happened in the past, I think that's a really powerful thing for a person to have. That's awesome. So that's what Richard said as well. Let's see. Studying other cultures, making connections with other people. Multiple people are saying that. Let's see. Get ideas for their own art making. Yes. And, anytime a student's making a work of art, you can always just throw in a connection. Like, oh, you know what? This artist did something similar. Like, look what they did and look at the problem that they're solving. It's really similar to what you're doing. And then the student can make a connection to that. Yes. Unites our eyes with our intellect. Ooh, I like that. I'm going to quote that. I'm going to save that and say, Richard. Oh, I can't copy it. Yes, I can. I really like that quote. Sorry. Richard said that. I'm going to open notes. Okay. I really like that. Okay. Yes. So, there are so many things that art does, and I'm not highlighting every single one of what you're saying, but I do have some kind of summary slides coming up. And what's interesting too is that, I like to tell this story of one of my students. We were talking about this artwork. We were talking about German Expressionism, and I was leading a discussion on this painting, which is one of my favorite paintings to talk about with kids. There's so much in this, and there are a lot of, elements and principles connection. There's a lot of emotion connection. There's a lot of historical context connection to World War I, and it's really cool. And so we were really getting into our discussion, having a good time, and one student, bless her, raised her hand, and she was always giving me trouble with this sort of stuff, but she was like, raise her hand like she did it online. This was when I was teaching online. But she was like, what are we learning here? How does this relate to art? That was her actual question to me. And I was like, well, first of all, it's art. So how does it relate to art? This is art. So check. But students don't often know what they're learning when they're participating in these sort of activities. Like they're just having fun, they're engaged, they're talking about art, they're sharing their ideas, and they don't realize that they are actually doing a lot of learning. There's a lot going on in their brain when they're having these sort of discussions. So I kind of point it out to them sometimes so that they kind of realize, oh yeah, I'm actually doing something here. It's not just fun time. Today, what we're going to do is discuss the importance of including a variety of artworks in your curriculum. We're going to talk about the various components that make up a work of art. I'm going to share with you kind of a lesson planning cycle that incorporates art history and art appreciation more in depth. And then we're going to talk about ideas for including art in your own teaching, depending on whatever classroom situation you're in, because I know not all of us can spend a week on art history before we do a project. That there's a lot of other things you can do, little small things that really add up in the end. And then you're going to learn about some ready-to-use resources and trainings to help you incorporate this into your curriculum. So just kind of sum up a lot of the things that you've said in the chat, and I know I wasn't able to read all of them because you had so many great ideas. I didn't want to just sit there and quote you guys all day long, but art is so much more than just drawing well. When I tell people I'm an art teacher, they say, oh, I can't draw. That's the first thing they always say. Or they say art history is boring. Those are the two things. So I can shut both of them down because art is so much more than just learning how to draw and drawing well. That art is about understanding life, the human spirit, understanding yourself better. It's about feeling and expressing emotion, connecting with other people, connecting with the artist, the culture who made it, the people who made it, connecting with, the people you're with while you're looking at it. There are so many connections to be made with people. It's about looking closely and, like Richard said, connecting the eye with the intellect. Is thinking critically and solving problems. Hold on, I'm losing my voice. Okay. Thinking critically and solving problems. There is so much art can teach us. It teaches us focus, like several of you said in the chat. It's observation, awareness. We are bombarded with images in our life everywhere we go. And our students more and more are getting trained to think fast, think of Snapchat, that lasts just a few seconds and then it's gone. And we really need to stop and teach kids how to really slow down and look at what they're being shown and understand the world better. And art can help us do that. It teaches us higher order thinking. This is an example of a compare and contrast I do in my Baroque lesson, where they compare the Caravaggio version versus the Gentileschi version. And then they have to decide. I don't tell them the artist names in advance, and they have to decide which one was done by a man and which one was done by a woman. So they're thinking about, okay, their own biases, their own societal biases that make them think, oh, women are weak or women are strong, kind of depending on what they say. Usually it's really mixed, about 50-50. People can argue either way. But they're using, all sorts of information, and they're creating new ideas through looking at art. And that's awesome. And then, of course, that connection with other people, empathy, connection, respect. We can look at art and we can learn how to have empathy and to connect. So that's all what it's about. Yeah, Richard, it is one of my favorite all-time activities of all time. I think I'm going to do a Facebook. I've been doing a lot of Facebook Lives lately. I think I'll do a Facebook Live on that one because it is super fun. I did write a blog post about it as well. So, but yeah, it's so fun. And then, of course, understanding yourself. And one of my all-time favorites is to spark curiosity and wonder for the world. We walk around the world, and I want my students to look at something and be curious about it and wonder about it and be like, oh, that's really cool. I've never seen anything like that. And then, really investigate. And art can help us do that. It can help us understand what this world has to offer us. It's really exciting. So this is kind of the why you should do it, right? This is all stuff we know, but it's really important. And then once I started to think about this, especially in elementary, it's really hard. And when I taught elementary too, it was really hard to incorporate works of art into my curriculum because I had 6 classes of each grade. So I only saw them once every 6 days. So every 6 weeks, only 5 times. It was only a 50-minute class period. 10 minutes of that is clean up and set up. And then, the teacher will show up late, always bringing the class. And so then I lost another 10 minutes. And then, so it's just like you lose time and time. And you don't get to make anything if you don't focus on the making. But if you just add in, one artwork per month, grades kinder through 5th grade, by the time they're done with elementary school, they have spent good quality time with 54 different works of art. And imagine what, and they'll carry those artworks with them forever. So imagine then you have one artwork per week in middle school. Now, I know not every middle schooler gets 3 semesters of art. This is an ideal world. This is my school. Everybody gets art and music because it's a small school. So they get 1 semester each year. But I realize, some people only get 1 or 2 or none, depending on, if they take band or whatever, they don't get art at all. But say they have 3 semesters of art and and then we make it down to 1 artwork per week for a semester. And then in high school, maybe they do just 1 semester of art and we look at 1 artwork per week there. Adding that all together in the span of a child's education, they will have spent time with 126 works of art. And not just, they just glanced at it and saw it on the wall, but they spent quality time looking at it and talking about it and thinking about it. And imagine how powerful that could be for a young person to enter the world having that much cultural background, within them. And, they're not going to remember all the details about everything, but they will remember a lot of the information. The ones they really connected with, they will remember and they will be excited about. So I'm just going to think about it that way, in that, yes, in the short term, it's hard to fit it in. And you have so many priorities. You've got to get the art on the walls. You've got to get art made so that you can get the art on the walls, because you got the art show coming up, and then you've got the art competition coming up, and all of this. But remember that, that in the end, this is a super valuable thing to accomplish. If you just do, make 9 artworks in a year. So coming to this presentation, I was kind of thinking about, okay, well, who all would be here? What types of art teachers would be here? And I was like, well, there are dozens of types of art teachers. And that is what's so wonderful about our field, is we really have the freedom to teach the way we want to teach. We can teach more history focused. We can do creative choice making, teaching for artistic behaviors, where it's full student choice. We can focus on, studio, and we can focus on techniques. We can focus on other cultures. There's so many different ways we can do STEAM. We can do social justice. That's not on here. I thought of it after. There are so many different things we can do. That almost it gets totally overwhelming, because we can't do everything. And then we pick one way to teach, and then all of a sudden we see other people doing other cool stuff, and we question what we're doing. So I had lunch with another teacher who went to my session last year at the Texas Art Education Association conference. I had a presentation and I talked to her afterwards. We had lunch. And one of the things that she said is, I think it might've been the first time she'd gone to a conference. I'm not sure, but she had been teaching 6 years. And one of the things she told me in that presentation was, after 6 years, I feel like just scrapping everything and starting over, because she went to one session that taught her this way of teaching. And then she went to another session that taught her another way of teaching. And then she went to another one that taught her this other way. And then she was just like, look at all the things my students are missing out on because I can't do everything. And it's just really overwhelming when you think about it, even for me. And I really, have a strong basis of the way I like to teach. But, I'm like, oh crap, I really would think trying choice-based would be really cool, So it's totally overwhelming. And so when we're looking through these ideas that I'm going to share with you, I want you to think about, don't worry about starting, okay, this is going to change everything, but how can I fit this stuff into what I'm already doing, what my priorities already are? Just add it in and not, don't worry about, starting from scratch. But, it's really hard because we want to try everything. And ultimately, the student will benefit from whatever your passion is. So I'm super passionate about looking and talking about art. And so that rubs off on my students, but you might be super passionate about something else. So in the end, the teacher is going to be the guide. So when you're deciding how to fit art history into your classroom, you kind of have to think about your individual classroom and what your goals are. So if your goals are to develop critical thinking and observation skills, you're going to insert art into your curriculum differently than if your goal is to illustrate studio art concepts and techniques. So you can kind of come at this from lots of different ways. So we can do more emotional understanding of creativity, a lot of like reflective journaling and things like that. Or, you can do a basic understanding of the timeline of art history. Like, to me, that's super important to me because I feel like I have a really excellent view of history in my head. And it's always been something I've been passionate about. And like a few years ago, this article came around on the internet of shocking history things. And I was reading through it and I was like, oh, that's not shocking. I know that. Oh, that's not shocking. Like that Oxford University is older than Aztecs. And then here's an example. I just kind of screenshotted one of the articles. There were several around the same time because, one blog does it, or one like BuzzFeed will do it. And then like 16 other websites will do the same article a different way. So that they'll get our traffic from it. The Great Pyramid was older to the Romans and the Romans are to us. So it's like, I love having that basis of history in my head because I feel like centered in the world that way. So, wrong way. So, it depends on what your individual classroom goals are, ultimately. And then your time spent on art history, of course, is going to change. So if you're more studio focused, you're going to have a little bit, but if you're more discipline based, you will have a lot. Sorry, I just knocked the microphone. Hopefully that didn't make a loud noise for you. Okay, so let's get into some of the meaty stuff. A lot of the whys. Okay, so here are all of the strategies. This is where my session starts to get a little overcrowded because I have a lot of ideas. But here are all the strategies we are going to cover for integrating art history into your curriculum. So you can see we're going to talk about discipline-based art education. So if you want to do full on art history into your curriculum, this is what I do. And then weekly, monthly, like art history time, artworks of the week, artists of the week, artists of the month, artists of the year, that sort of thing. How to integrate your classroom decor so they're exposed to more artwork. Ideas for choice-based classrooms, bell ringers, and then combining studio instruction with looking at art as well. I love that you do the first 10 minutes of art history. That's awesome. Yeah, it's hard because some days you're just like, oh, we just need to finish this freaking project. Like we've been working on it so long, but like it's so valuable, so incredibly valuable. So yeah, let's talk about all of those strategies. So when I'm talking about art history and integrating art, I'm kind of using art history in sort of a broad way. Because I'm kind of lumping art appreciation and art criticism in with art history for some of these ideas. Because when we look at an individual work of art, there is so many different aspects we can look at it from. So we've got one artwork here. That's this gray thing on the left. I should have put like a actual artwork in that circle. We have the form, we have what it looks like. We have all the physical and visual characteristics. We have the elements and principles of art. We have the design, the composition, all of that stuff, the technique, the media, all of that. Then we have the theme, the meaning, the big ideas, the subject matter, the story, the emotions, all of that is in the theme. And then we have the context, why was it made? Who made it? When did they make it? Who paid for it? What happened before? What happened after? All of that complex meaning of all of these things can fit into one individual work of art. So they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. I'm like, pictures are way more than 1,000 words. Like every artwork has so much behind it, and that we can focus on one part of this. We can really get in depth and do all of it with one work of art, but we can spend multiple class periods on one work of art and still not cover everything about it, which is really crazy. Lizzie, there is a way for you to get a copy of the presentation. I will tell you about it at the end. But you also will get the recording as well. Yeah, I create a lot of slides. Usually I don't have so many slides, but I'm like, I'm just going to keep it moving. So there's a lot of slides today. Usually my PowerPoints are like 15 slides, but I was like, I wanted to keep you guys, engaged with your eyes as well. So yeah. Okay. So I'm going to stop for a second because I've been chattering too much, and we have some stuff in the sidebar. Artist research project. Yes. You know what? I didn't even include that in here, but that is really good. And I do, also artist research project, but also like a culture. So like a group of students will research a culture and do a presentation, which is really fun. And I love the recreate a collaborated piece. That's really cool. And let's see, we have a warm-up activity and a focus on one artist every 2 weeks. I think that's totally reasonable. Yeah, one artist every 2 weeks. And it doesn't necessarily have to relate to your project. I'm getting ahead of myself because we're going to talk about that in a minute. So I'll stop. I was going to start presenting another part of the presentation right then. So yeah, one artwork, one art movement, one art time period, so much is going on with it. And so when you're teaching, an art history lesson, you've got the context, the values and beliefs of the people, the what, the why, the who, the when. You've got all of that, and you've got, the materials, techniques, and processes. So like if we're using Renaissance for an example, the context is so rich. And then materials and techniques and processes, you're talking about the invention of oil paint. You're talking about the invention of one-point perspective. All of those things that are really important components of the art. Pyramid configuration and all of that stuff. And then, that's stylistic conventions. I got ahead of myself. But it's they're similar. You've got the style, what it looks like. How can you tell a Renaissance art from a Baroque art? How can you tell a Renaissance art from, anything else? And then the subject matter, what was their common subject matter? In the Renaissance, it was, it's funny I said Renaissance. It's never my example, so it's not on the top of my head. Themes Bible stories, but also themes of human individuality, human greatness, stuff like that. It's funny. I usually always do Impressionism or Egypt as my example on this slide, so I got confused there for a second. I have a thing about the Renaissance, which I'll tell you in a minute. I've got a story about the Renaissance. And then I take this. So if you're doing full-on art history, so maybe you're teaching AP art history, or you're teaching community college, or something like that. Actually, I've used this with middle school students too. It worked well. Is I have this chart, and so we study an art movement, and at the end of it, or throughout, they can take notes on this. Is they take the information and then they can plug it in to these categories. So they're not only they're learning the information, but then they have to categorize the information. They have to summarize the information, and then they have to put it somewhere. And so that helps them remember it better. And so this is a great thing. And in community college, I would print them a booklet of this. And at the end of the year, if they had it all filled out in the semester, they would get bonus points on their final exam. So, gave them some reason to do it, Yeah, Danielle, you are welcome to do that. If just for your own personal use, of course, but not, don't go on and share it in a, group or something or whatever. I don't know. And also a lot of this stuff is linked, so you'll get links to that afterwards. But yeah, you're welcome to. That's how I take notes too. Sometimes I just take pictures because I can't write it all down. But there is an opportunity to get this PowerPoint later, which I will tell you about in a minute. Okay. All right. Yeah, this chart is awesome. It works really well because a lot of the times when you're doing these, the teaching activities like I do, which are really interactive and they're collaborative and they're, doing a lot, the students don't stop and think, hey, I should write this stuff down. They just think they're having fun. Like they don't even know, that they're learning something. And so this kind of at the end of the lesson be like, oh, hey, so now we did this activity. What did you learn while you did it? And that's when they can realize that they did that. They can write when they fill this out. So I made that mistake with my 9th graders this year. Is like we did this whole lesson on ancient Mesopotamia, and then I gave them a quiz, and they bombed it. And then I asked them the questions from the quiz like out loud, and they knew it, like they knew the answers. And I was like, well, why didn't you write that down? And they were like, well, I didn't understand. Like they just didn't process like what we did when we looked at the art was they were actually learning something. So it was. So I went on a lesson like, how do you learn art history? Which I have a resource for too. And my resource library is how to study art history, like teaches them exactly what all of these things are and, shows examples so that they know exactly how to fill this out. Because we had to really step back with them because they were just like, yeah, it was funny, but it was my fault. Like it was my fault they bombed that because I didn't teach them that they were learning. Like they knew it. I don't know. They could answer the questions like in person, but they didn't know how to write them down. It was interesting. Anyway, I have a blog post about that, and that's also in my resource library, and I think I also have it in my store if you wanted to buy that PowerPoint with that chart. Okay, so now let's talk about some teaching methodologies for teaching art history, and I want you to think back to an art history class you've taken in your past. I'm sure you've all taken one. Survey of art history, at least when you were in college. What was it like? How was it taught? Oops, I skipped ahead. Because when I taught, I have an art history degree from UT Austin, and I have, so I've taken lots of art history classes. And I think I had one art history professor that actually sort of made it exciting. He would jump up on the table and he was so incredibly passionate about what he taught that he made it more fun. Still, it was all lecture, right? It was lecture in the dark with slides. Back then it was a slide projector, like not even, they didn't have PowerPoints. I don't know how they survived. Boring, right? And then when I tell people I teach art history, they think, oh, art history is so boring. And I tell them, no, it's not boring at all. Like it is really fun and it's really engaging and really exciting if you're taught it in the correct way, not in a dark room. Leah says memorizing dates and names, etc. Like I have so many art dates in my head, like, and they were drilled into me and I will never forget, like Picasso's Mademoiselle painting. I will always know the date of that. I have so many dates and of course I'm a history nerd. So I'm like, I like having those dates in my head, but for most people, that's torture, right? And so it really depends on what people are saying is the passion of the professor. So I had one professor who wrote all her lectures and then read them to us. And I cannot be read to. Like anything. You read to me anything, I will immediately check out. Like I cannot process what you're saying. And so like that, I didn't learn anything about American art that year because I had to teach myself because I could not get it. And then I had one who took videos of himself walking around Pompeii. And we watched the videos of him walking around Pompeii talking about the stuff there. And, it was just like, oh my gosh, like this is so passive, So traditional ways of teaching art history are not only boring, but they are ineffective. Lecture, studies have proven that lecture is not an effective teaching tool, right? It is a good teaching tool for some people. For me, it was good because I'm very auditory. So if you have a animated speaking voice, I can remember anything that you say forever and ever. But, for most people, and I was so passionate about the art. So it really depends on the teacher. But for most people, that's torture to sit there in a boring room and someone tells you a lot of details that you don't really care about. So I decided that it would be important, and this was called Art in the Dark. That's, and I still do Art in the Dark mainly because you got to turn the lights off to see the artwork, but we still do exciting art in the dark, not boring art in the dark. Oh yeah. I had my high school teacher did, art history with the music, and it was really cool. It was really, I loved that. And he was really good. But, lecture is a passive receipt of knowledge. It's going to reach some people who can process information that way. But if you're going to remember it, you need to be actively doing something with that information, right? You need to be students should actively construct knowledge for themselves. Like, they have to do it. They have to, find out that information for themselves to develop that complex and deep knowledge of a subject. And that learning is not something that we do to somebody. They have to do it themselves. So I like to, sorry, Daniel, that's funny. They were so excited they could barely. Oh, good. That's good. Having an excited teacher really is important. But a lot of the things people are saying here is the dates and the names and all the little tiny details, which to us as art people, we can eat that stuff up. But really, for students, we have to kind of pare it down a little bit. And so when you're starting with an art movement or an art period that you're going to teach, it's important to start with the end in mind. Like, what at the end of the lesson do you want them to actually learn? I guess, that's writing learning objectives, but I hate writing learning objectives. So I just kind of have a little list, and I'm sure that I guess that is a learning objective, but I don't know. I don't want to write them down that way. And then teach those things, and then don't worry about everything that you can't fit in. And so I put the Renaissance art on here. And so you can see in the chat, what do you think are the most important things you would want students to know about the Renaissance at the end of an art history unit? So think that through while I tell this story about the Renaissance here. I put the Renaissance on this slide mainly because I pretty much have panic attacks every time I need to teach the Renaissance. Like, I avoid teaching the Renaissance if I can help it, because first of all, that one art history teacher I had in college that was so good was Italian Renaissance. And we did only the Medici family during the whole semester. And so, there's so much information about the Renaissance to cover. There are all the great masters. There's, all the techniques. There's all the context. And there's so much that I feel like I am not going to do this justice with my lesson. And so I freak out every time I have to teach the Renaissance. And it's funny because I have this membership program, the resource library, where I put all my PowerPoints and stuff. And there was no Italian Renaissance PowerPoint in there, even though almost every other major art movement was covered until 2 months ago, even though I've had it for 2 years, because I would start to work on it and I would freak out because I just can't stand it. I don't know why, but, we need to start with, what do we want them to learn about it? What do we want them to remember? And then, it's okay to forget the rest. You don't have to cover everything, because in the end, what's more important is the themes, the big ideas, the feelings, the connection. and not necessarily all the facts and details. So like what Danielle says is she wants students to learn that it's a rebirth of learning, like that it was huge that all of a sudden people were like curious again about the world, and they were excited, and they were learning and studying. There was science and art, and it was just really cool, and like that human spirit just exploded. And so that's the type of stuff we want to get across to the students, not, Donatello lived for, he was these dates, and he lived, he was first, and then Michelangelo and Da Vinci were kind of around the same time, and then Raphael was a little bit younger than them. Like, we don't need that information. Like, really not important to know that Donatello was the oldest of them and Raphael was the youngest of them. We really need to focus on quality, not quantity. That we don't want to sacrifice true understanding of the time period and of the art and true connection to the art for covering everything. Because once we try to cover everything, it immediately turns into lecture, because you're just trying to get all of that out of your brain into their brains, and then you completely lose them. So, and knowing them, yes, like knowing them were an artist. Yeah. I want them to go away knowing that Michelangelo is totally amazing. Like, I want them to think that Michelangelo is like one of the greatest people that ever lived, that, because I believe that, but it's like, they don't need to know his full birth year or whatever, all that stuff. So understanding is more important. Okay. So there are lots of ways to do this. And so when I teach art history, I don't lecture if I can help it. Sometimes, you just have to tell people some things, but I will never sit there for an hour and tell someone something. Is I try to, in all ways, to get the kids to come up with the information for themselves first before I tell them the information. And so that's what I have here on this discovery learning category, is that, that we craft activities and we craft discussions and around the students arriving at that information for themselves. And sorry, Richard's comment just popped through. I don't want to highlight it. Yes, I think, having like a general dates are great. So, my history teacher in high school, so what was I going with? Then Jeannie's comment popped up and I started reading that, and I will say what I'm going to say and then I will read it. When we started to study the Civil War, she made us, ingrained in us, the dates of the Civil War. Like, she said, you have to know this in your life. You have to know that the Civil War was 1861 to oh my gosh. It's because I'm trying to say it out loud, but I know it. 1860 to 1864, I think, or 1 to 5. Oh my gosh. I'm totally ruining this because I have these dates memorized. I will tell you later when I'm not put in under pressure. But like she was like, this is something you need to know in your life because this is recent. This is not like ancient history. Like, this was just like, at the time when I was in her class, it was like 130 years before, so it was like really important. So I think, yeah, it's important that the dates are used in terms of like understanding what comes first and next and that sort of thing, for sure. Okay. And then Jeannie says, right. Yeah. The little idiosyncrasies of Michelangelo make him more human and relatable and more interesting. Yeah. I think, and stories about the artists, I think, are fun. And like, the story of when Michelangelo unveiled the Pietà and people thought it was another sculptor. I think they thought it was Donatello or someone else. And so that night he went in and carved his name on the sash of Mary so that they would know that he did it. And then like stuff like that. I'm like, that's such a fun story. And it speaks to bigger themes of the Renaissance, that this was the first time, artists were considered like geniuses, and we know artists' names, because before that we didn't really know a lot of artists' names. So, and those stories can teach bigger things too. Okay. Rambling. Okay. So back to discovery learning. yeah, that we figure out ways to get them to get there on their own, because if they figure it out on their own, they're going to take more ownership of it. They're going to remember it better. So activity-based, hands-on, a lot of discussion, collaboration. I do a lot of little group activities and reflection activities where they're crafted in a way that I'm trying to get them to really think this stuff through. And then also another way to do this is to have students learn the content on their own before, and like through videos or reading or something like that. And then they do something with that knowledge so that then they use what they've learned. So the activities that I'm going to share with you kind of are one of those two ways of teaching. One second, I need a drink. So I have tons of ways to teach art history that are non-lecture, and I'm not going to go over all of them. I'm just going to give you a couple examples because that's not really the topic of today, because I could go on and on about this for days because it's what I'm passionate about, but that's not really the topic of today's session. So if you are wanting to do a more heavily focused art history, you can do discussing and writing about art, guided practice, comparing, grouping, categorization, and then creative activities. And then I'm going to share with you how to get some more resources on this too. But here's a couple examples of what I mean. So here's one when you're teaching prehistoric art, that before you show them any of the art, before you talk about art from the prehistoric time period, we put ourselves into the position of a caveman and what was life like. And then they think about, well, why would a caveman need art at all? What would the function be? Like, if all you're doing in your life is hunting and gathering, what do you need art for? And then imagining you're a caveman, how would you do it? What do you have in your life that would make art? And then what will your limitations be? So these are kind of getting yourself in the mindset of the people who made it before you ever even look at the art. Another example is compare and contrast. And I love compare and contrast. And if you saw me on Facebook yesterday, I did a compare and contrast example on Facebook Live. So you can go to my Facebook page and find it. It was yesterday afternoon. Where you study, you've studied one art movement, and in this case, it's the Renaissance, and then you're introducing Baroque art, and then you compare and contrast them. So, how is Baroque art different from the Renaissance? So in this activity, I have 5 different groups of artworks. There's Michelangelo's David, Bernini's David, side by side. There's a Raphael next to a Gentileschi, and there's there's an architecture one, and there's another sculpture one. And so each group gets their set of artworks that they have to study, and then they make a list of what the differences are, and then we talk about them as a group. And then we start to realize that in all of the groups, the Baroque artwork kind of had the same characteristics. They had the cropped in compositions. They had more expressive use of their bodies and expressive use of their faces. The people were more everyday life people rather than they were kind of scruffier and rougher. The backgrounds were dark and had dramatic lighting. There's foreshortening. There's all of these things that they noticed across all of the examples. And so at the end of that, we have a list of these are the characteristics of Baroque art. And they figured that out on their own. I could have put up some Baroque art and I said, here is a list of what Baroque art looks like. And it is dramatic lighting. Do you see the dramatic lighting, students? And it's called chiaroscuro and this and that. Here, they closed in the composition, see how it's closed in. But instead of me telling them all of that information, they figured it out on their own. And they have a list, and that's going to stick in their head a lot better because they were a part of it. They did it. I love compare and contrast so much. Okay. The one I did yesterday was it was a Roman mosaic with a what's it called? Byzantine mosaic, which is yesterday. I can't even remember. Yeah, Donatello's David. I can't remember. There's another. I can't remember the other sculpture example. I think it's Bernini's Exie of Saint Teresa next to Can't remember which one is next to. So here's another one. It's kind of, this is kind of a flipped learning thing where you work in a group to either study one art movement or one part of an art movement. For example, like if you're doing ancient Egypt, each group gets one area of the afterlife. So like one group has canopic jars, one group has Shabti figures, one group has tomb sculpture, one group has jewelry, another group has something else. And so they all have something related to the afterlife. They study it, and then each member of each group then has to teach it to the other groups. So then you have a bunch of mixed groups with one member from each of the previous groups, and they teach it to them, to each other. And so they have to not only learn it, figure it out, discuss it, but then they have to teach it. And when they teach it, they're going to remember it better. So that helps kind of cement that as well. And I've also done it with art movements in art appreciation class because I have, try to cover everything syndrome. And so I did like a bunch of different art movements, and then they kind of taught each other. Like it was like modern art, or like a bunch of little art movements within modern art. So that's Jigsaw. So if this is exciting to you and you want to learn more, I do have a bunch of online workshops like this where you can learn some of these strategies. And they are available in my store, and they are also available as a part of the resource library for art teachers. But the ones that you might be interested in are what is art history? That's where I really cover that chart that I told you at the beginning. What is art? Where we talked about aesthetics. How to look at art with kids, which is more discussion techniques. And then inventive activities to interpret art is one where I do a lot of creative activity stuff. So those are all available in the resource library, also available in my online store recordings. And then I do one every month. So this one is next month is creative assessments. Then I'm going to do compare and contrast, memorization and close observation activities, and then viewpoints and critical lenses. So I have lots of topics to talk about in these online workshops. So usually those are $14. This month is free. So okay, what's next? Okay. Oh, that slide is in here twice. Let's take it out. So sorry, I'm just skipping ahead just because I don't want to run out of time. Do I want this slide? I keep taking the slide out and putting it back in. So, if you're wanting to do a more chronological approach for art history, there's kind of pros and cons with it. And that's why the next ideas are going to be more smaller scale. So I'm actually going to skip ahead that slide. Okay. So this strategy that I use is discipline-based art education. I think I use it. I don't actually, I studied what that was a long time ago, and I do all of 4 of these things. So I'm calling it that. Where instead of only studio art, that you are incorporating all of these other areas of art into it: art history, art criticism, and aesthetics, which is the philosophy of art. That in every lesson, in every unit that I do, they are looking at art and making connections to it and criticizing it and interpreting it. And then aesthetics, they're talking about like the value of art, because that ultimately that prehistoric question of why do they need art in the first place is an aesthetics question. And then they're studying the context as well. And then in doing art projects. So here's kind of a lesson cycle of what it looks like in my classroom. And again, I teach grades 6th through 10th. So we start with, I'm going to answer your question in just a second, Lizzie. We start with art criticism and art and discovery exercises. So, like the compare and contrast activity, or, in Impressionism, they view all the works from the first Impressionist exhibit, and they make lists of their common characteristics, or maybe they do a poetry writing exercise about a Rococo painting, and that sort of leads them to the main themes of Rococo. Or, so, different types of things that kind of get them thinking. We learn the art history content through these activities. And then we do usually some creative connections with the art, like some creative writing or some reflection writing, ways to connect it to yourself. I try to fit that in as much as I can. Then I test them over the material. And then they do an art project that is related, but not 100%. Like, it's not like they're making copies, but they're, using some of the key ideas and making their own with as much choice built in as possible. I try to not just, make duplicates, but most of my expertise is in this right side. And so most of my resources are really focused on that. And then art critique and reflection of their own art making. So that's kind of the lesson cycle that I use in my own classroom. And it usually takes about 2 to 3 weeks per unit to get through everything. I usually do at least a week of the art history, art appreciation side before we move on to the project. Lizzie, what you want is 10 works of art, the history, interesting fact. Yes, my whole website. When you're done, I'm going to give you there's going to be some links that you're sent. And in there, there's like one that says 5 artworks your students will love. And there's my Art Around the World series. I did Art Around the World in 30 days. And I also did an email series this summer, Art Around the World in 21 days. Most of them have some information about the artwork, as well as some discussion questions that you can ask. But that is my blog has tons of that. So if you just kind of click through, you'll find all sorts of stuff. I can't think of any product I offer that has that exactly. But that's pretty much what I write about on my website. So, yeah, start with those links that I send you after this in your email. And so here is an example of some of my Impressionist exhibit. So, or not exhibit. I saw the word exhibit on the screen. Marianne, most of my students are ELL. They're about 60%. I teach in a low income school, and I have, I think, an 80% economically disadvantaged. And I have about 60 to 70% ELL. And, they love this because, it's more interactive and more engaging. It's more fun, and there's less risk involved on their part. And I pare it down, they're not having to learn every little tiny detail, and that we really cement it. And there's a lot of opportunity for them to learn it, and a lot of opportunity for them to use language too in the discussions and hear other people talking. And I think, I think this way to teach is perfect for ELL. I've found really good results in my class. I have to do some modifications. Like, some of my students, I have to do like the assessments I'll just do them orally, or providing some extra study guides and vocabulary work and stuff like that. But in general, like, they really respond well to this, and they remember it well. So they like it. Okay, so my impression, this is just to show you one example of a full lesson, is with Impressionism, we study works from the first Impressionist exhibit. It's called the Salon of the Rejects. Basically, they were all rejected from the main salon, and they had an exhibit. We list the common characteristics. We learn the basic characteristics of Impressionism, which is elbow, everyday life, light, brushstrokes, outdoor setting, and weather. I didn't create that. You can Google that if you forget. And then we predict how artists responded to technology. We study the invention of the camera, the invention of the paint tube, and how that impacted art. We read primary source critiques of the exhibit, or depending on the grade level, we'll just read quotes of that, and then we'll predict, how that the artist would have responded. Then we go outside and we draw. And we look at the light outside and talk about what the light looks like. And then we practice making brushstrokes. So it's like, it's a lot of stuff. And then they ended up making, in this case, they made sort of an Impressionist style thing. In other ones, Jacqueline, I'll get to your question too in just a second. In other activities, like I did an African one where like we studied African sculpture, and I took out little kind of essences of each type of sculpture we looked at. And we looked at like 5 different types from around Africa, and then made a really highly personal sort of time capsule type of art project that it was really to represent who they are as a person and that sort of thing. So it doesn't have to be you just make an artwork in the style of the art, because that's super boring. You have to try to fit in a lot of personal choice in there too. Yes, Richard. My kids, I never gave them the expectation that they were going to be making art every day, so they just have to deal with it. Jacqueline, yes, we usually, it's like a week on, week off kind of. Like, we're doing a lot of art history, art stuff, and then we spend about a week on the project. And on the project days, I'll integrate some art looking too, sometimes, like in the bell ringers and stuff. But usually maybe a little over a week, depending on the complexity of the project. And then, for example, when we did surrealism, and I did, with one group, I did surreal portraits. And then, so we studied facial proportions, and then in another one, we did like surreal rooms, and we studied linear perspective and how to make, something look like a realistic depiction of space. So you're doing the studio art content too. But you fit it in. Like, I don't do like elements and principles lessons. I just like, when we're studying post-impressionism, that's when we're going to study color, because that's really big, And so when we did early photography with my 8th graders, we did line, because we were going to do this like flip book thing. So, yeah. Oh, coloring sheets. Don't even. I can't take it. Okay. My students said, don't ask me that, because I built in at the very beginning, like on day 1, we look and talk about art. Cause I wanted to get them right into the mindset of, this is what we do here. And this is what we do a lot of, and you're going to do it. And they love to do it. Like they never complain, because they just think it's great fun. Oh man, Mary. Yeah, I kind of came into, well, actually, I'm not gonna, never mind. I was gonna tell you a story, but then I don't want to call anyone out, so never mind. How do you get a project done in a week? I don't know. You know what? I've never actually timed it, but I don't know. I don't know. Maybe my projects are not complex enough. Maybe they should be longer. But I find then you've got all these kids who just rush through, and then you've got all these kids who are half done and half not done, and then you have the one kid in the corner who talked the whole time. And yeah, I like to move on. I like the art teaching stuff better. The art discussions better. So I like to do that as much as I can. It really is up to you what you do. But oh man, Jeannie, having them every day has been such a game changer. When I taught elementary, it was so hard. Okay, I'm going to skip this because we're going to run out of time. So just ignore those 2 slides. Oh, this was the time capsule thing I was going to tell you about. The final products did not end up looking too great. If I do it again, I'll totally change it. But we basically took, we looked at different sculpture, and we took little essences of it. Like this one on the left, the Nkisi Nkondi power figure with the nails in it. It's about, you put inside of it the things that sort of bring it its life and bring it its spirit. And so then, like in the box, we put things that bring us life and bring us joy in our life. They drew pictures of them and put them in, and then they drew their life story, which connects to the one on the right. So it's like, really connected to the kind of basic themes and ideas of the art, but not necessarily, we are going to make a sculpture that looks like an Nkisi Nkondi power figure, and we're going to stick some toothpicks in it. We don't do stuff like that. Try to make it as meaningful as possible for the student. Okay, so that's like, you want to go full force into it, and then you want to go full on art history. Now we're going to step back and do some other ideas of, how can we do this in smaller ways that are a little bit maybe more accessible to the average, especially elementary teacher who does not you don't have time to do that. If you did a week of art instruction or art appreciation activities, that's an entire 6 weeks. You can't lose an entire 6 weeks on that. So, one thing that works really well, and I also did this too, because with my middle and high, is I did an artwork of the week and on Fridays, and it was really good because, if like one class was behind another class, this would give some catch up time. Because I had one class that was at the end of the day and they came after PE and we had dismissal, and like they finished half of what everyone else finished. So they never got like the art of the week Fridays because they just were trying to catch up with everybody else. But so it kind of works really well with that is, for people who still have projects to finish or whatever, is we would do an artwork on Fridays and talk about it. And then the rest of the time they could work on their sketchbooks, or they can finish up projects that they didn't finish when we were working on them in class. And so that works really well. Elementary, you could do an artwork of the month or maybe an artwork of the 6 weeks. And so maybe one class period out of every 6 weeks, you do this. And then you do maybe it's even half the class period, and the other half they get to draw or something, or free draw or sketchbook draw or whatever they want to do, whatever you want to have them do. So that they're still getting it, but you can't, you're still able to accomplish all the other things that you're trying to do. And then you could even do, I know one district here in Dallas, the Garland ISD's elementary does, their curriculum for elementary is they have an artist of the year, and what do they do? Okay, a culture of the year, an artist of the year, and an artwork of the year, I think. So gives the teacher a lot of freedom. But at the end of their elementary, they've got a pretty substantial like background knowledge and a lot of different things. So, you could even just maybe, all your kinders, they're going to do, Keith Haring or whatever. And then all your, I don't know, whatever artist you choose. But it could be just of the month or of the year or of the 6 weeks or whatever. So Jacqueline says, you know what, in my school, I teach at a classical school, so they like the art history stuff, but like, yeah, I'm wondering if that's true. I'd be interested in taking a poll. Maybe I'll do that in the art teacher group, is like, how much pressure do you feel of making art? And I'm wondering too, is how much of that is self-imposed. We're like, oh, we got to get the art on the walls. We got to get art in the hallways and all of that. I'm wondering, like, is it self-inflicted pressure? Is it admin inflicted pressure? Or, where is that pressure? Where are we feeling that? Yeah, when I was hired, they were like, you can do full on art history with no art making if you want. I was like, oh, I wouldn't do that to the kids. I was like, I would love that, because I find the art making days sometimes to be a little bit boring, because I like to, I don't know. So yeah. That'd be an interesting question. I'm gonna put that on the future questions to ask list. So during your artwork of the day things, because we're gonna run out of time, so I'm gonna make sure we get through this next. I think we're coming up on the end here. I'm very long-winded today. During your artwork of the week discussions, or artwork of the month, or artwork of the 6 weeks, or whatever you're gonna do, every time, it doesn't just have to be a discussion. It can be some sort of engaging activity or interactive activity or group activity. So here's an example of one that I did last year at the beginning of all of my classes, where we did the two Fridas. And then we discussed it, and then they had to write a script between the two Fridas, like what conversation that they would have and what they would say to each other. And so those are two of my students acting out what the their two Fridas scripts. And I thought that was really fun. And they didn't have to act them out. They didn't have to present them, but a lot of them did. Or a lot of them, there was always like a couple hams in the group would act out everyone else's script. So, that girl on the right, I think she was in 5 of people's productions of their script. She just thought it was really funny. Another example is they write poetry. So here's another one that does empathy, where they looked at work by Dorothea Lange, and then they thought about what it's like from her perspective, what she sees and what she feels. And then here's another, I had multiple Dorothea Lange ones, and here's one of my students' work. As you can tell from that lovely 8th grade handwriting, is I'm scared of being alone. Wait. No, I don't know what that says. Wait, alone, wait, no one come to me. I don't know what that says. I think I probably would have been able to read the actual one, but the image is fuzzy. I see a happy family. I see people laughing. I say we should help. I feel sadness. I wonder if anyone will love us. I want a family to love me. I dream I want a family. I'm poor and alone. And of course, you're going to have the goofballs in the class who, one of them, it was like this guy, oh, did anyone else lose sound? Let me know. I didn't bump anything. Mic is still plugged in. Okay, good. Hopefully Suzanne figures it out. You're going to have the goofballs. Like I had one group who was like, I want lunch. I dream of Taco Bell. I am Juan. We had a student named Juan in the class. And so that was pretty funny. Like, but so you're going to have the goofballs who are just, going to be silly, but it was still really fun. And then they still made a connection with the art, even if they were silly. Oh, good. Welcome back, Suzanne. Okay. Here's another one. This is, I have a blog post on my website, 82 questions to ask about art. One day I was going to try to write 100 questions that you could ask. I was going to make this master list of all the questions you could ask about an artwork. And I was really excited to get to 100, and I could not get past 82 because they started to get totally ridiculous after a while. So I have 82 questions to ask about art. And I also formatted on them little cards that you can print and like hang at. Use them in different ways. Each group could get a different question, or everybody has a different question. They write their answer on the back and then they pass it. And the picture on the right is the workshop I gave in Dallas this last weekend I guess a week from today. I did a teacher workshop in Dallas, and I hung up the cards around the room, and then they wrote their answers on Post-its and put them up. And so then at the end, you can walk around and see what everyone else thought about the questions. So that's another thing you could do. It gets kids moving around as well, which is good. And then here's just my questions. You can Google this, but also you're going to get that list of links I told you about. You're going to get a link to that blog post so you can see all the questions. But you can see they started to get really ridiculous. It was like total personification. I was going like, if the artwork was a person, what would their job be? And like all this ridiculous stuff. And then I was like, okay, I should stop because it's just not useful anymore. But so 82. Okay, so tons of creative activities that you can do. And one of the things that you can get if you join my email list, which you are already on my email list if you're here, but is my 8-pack of worksheets, which that character poem is on there, and other ones as well. You can also set up your classroom to interact more with art history. This awesome poster is available online, and I was going to have a coupon for it as my bonus for my resource library sale, but I haven't heard back from her. So she said yes, and then I haven't heard from her. But this is awesome. It's 5'2". I bought it for my own classroom, and then I was like, oh my gosh, I got to tell everyone about this. It's so good. And she did like wood block prints of all these famous artworks, and then it has like all the timeline. But the link is timelinestaircase.com. And new members of my site may or may not get a coupon. I'm waiting to hear back from her, but regardless, it's super cool. And yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, over 5 foot tall. I'm worried my students are going to wreck it, so I'm kind of scared to hang it up. But you can also get, discontinued calendars of past years, cheap art books like those Taschen art books where they are about an artist and cut them up and use those as posters, stuff like that, and fill your room with art so that it's just around them. I want to, man, that timeline is so cool. I'm going to laminate it. I'm going to take it, but I'm worried. I'm going to take it to get it laminated. And she was like, it's FedEx. She said it was, I forgot how much she said, but it was going to be like over $20 to laminate it because it's so big. And so I don't know what I'm going to do, but I don't want to wreck it. So I'll probably just spend the money to laminate it because it's so good. I kind of want to just hang it in my house because it's so cool. Okay, timelinestaircase.com. It's like $40, but it's really awesome. I can imagine the students would just really get a kick out of just, when they're done, just to go and kind of study that for a while, and they learn something new every now and then. Okay, so this slide's really terrible. I don't normally have all this amount of text on the slide, but It's all right. This is for choice-based classroom. So here's a bunch of ideas. So if you are in a situation where you do more choice-based, or this also works for you, like early finishers stations, you know, when they finish early, you've got this stuff set up. But, you know, providing images related to whatever medium they're doing, making connections between student work and related artists. So they're making something and you're like, oh, you know what? This looks really similar to what Jasper Johns did. Like, look at his art and make that connection. So they've made a connection with an artist who kind of is working similarly to them. Creating an art history center with games, puzzles, scavenger hunts. Like, you could hang up a bunch of stuff in your room, and then you make a scavenger hunt, and you know, they have to walk around and like find stuff, and that's something they can kind of slowly work on. Have like a slides of artwork going while their students are working. That's something I really would like to do that I haven't tried yet, is just having artwork kind of shuffle through. And, you know, you put the slides on a timer, and, you know, for those students who just ever look up and get some inspiration every now and then, or, you know, a video or something. If you have technology in your classroom, which I don't, but you could do like web quests and online scavenger hunts and links to museum websites and stuff. And there are more ideas on this link here, teachingforartisticbehavior.org. I came up with most of these, and then I went and found this link, and there are these and tons more. But what I really loved about a quote from that page is, approach the history of art with enthusiasm. Actually, I think I put it big. Approach the history of art with enthusiasm and appreciation. Set up the circumstances of your students to find and connect with the art that they love, because that can, you know, that is what they will carry with them, you know, in their life. So to walk away with something that they love, and you've shown that through your own passion, is really important. And then I think this is my last activity idea, is bell ringers. You know, instead of just doing only art making or something like that, is to have your bell ringers be around artwork. And that's something I'm kind of slowly working on, is I want to create like this master bell ringer thing with like art and questions about it, so that, you know, I want it to be really big. So where you just always have a bunch of art bell ringers at your disposal. I haven't made it yet, but it's something I'd like to do. But, you know, write 3 observations about an artwork. Usually that, you know, with my ELL students, that's what I usually do, is write 3 things you notice, you know, like that's it. Because, like, you know, their writing skills are not as good, and their language skills are not as good. And sometimes that's all they can do. And you can't necessarily even read it sometimes, with my middle schoolers, but, you know, they're still thinking about it, and they're writing it. You know, write 3 truths and a lie about the artwork, and what will happen next in this painting. A Lizzie bell ringer is like some people call it do now, or it's basically like what you have up on the screen or on the board for the students to do immediately when they come in, so that they immediately get to work and are focused. And it's, you know, time for you to do your attendance or whatever you need to do at the beginning of class as well. So just like a really kind of a warm up, basically. And then another thing, especially for elementary, because my students don't necessarily wait in line. But like for elementary, they do, you know, while they're waiting to be picked up, because, you know, the teachers are always late to pick up their classes, is you do like a little I Spy game, or you do some kinesthetic activities, or you have a little art discussion while you're waiting for the teacher to pick them up, stuff like that. Or every day they have to find something new, or they make a tableau vivant, which is like a living picture where they have to act out the whole scene, you know, physically. So just, you know, think about using that time creatively. I know at that time you might be, you know, feverishly like cleaning paint cups or, you know, wiping tables or whatever, but, you know, there is time to be had while they're waiting to have fun and explore art as well. And I got this stock photo, and you could tell it, you know, these kids were all photoshopped together, and there's like the creepiest thing ever, and I can't not look at it. I still used the photo, but like if you look at circle, she's like right up on him, and her nose is like right in his shirt. It's like totally cracking me up every time I look at it. Okay. I had a lot of funny, I really enjoy stock photo, finding stock photos because they're just totally ridiculous sometimes. But I like this one until this creepy stalker girl right on top of that guy. And he's totally fine with it. He doesn't even know. That's me in middle school, like crushing on all the boys, like creepily looking at their backs. Okay. And then, this is the last one, is combining your studio skills with looking at art. So using artworks for drawing exercises, this one is really good for blind contour. It's super funny. You create some pretty, she's a sniffer. That's funny. Yes. So this one is like really good for the lag. Sorry, you probably notice I get your comments a little late, so I'm laughing about he probably typed that a while ago. So yeah, blind contour, elements and principles practice, teaching the art concepts like perspective, bringing in examples from art history as much as you can. And I have a series on my website, and it's not complete yet, but I have like lists of artworks that use line, list of artworks that use color, list of artworks that use emphasis, list of artworks that use balance, so that you can have those ready to pull out whenever you want. I haven't gotten through all the elements and principles yet, mainly because it takes a long time to make those little collage images on there and find all the links and format it all right. Still haven't finished them all, but I'll get to all of them eventually. I think I have probably 6 or 7 of them up there right now. So, finding examples from art history to teach these concepts. And then this is just a drawing activity where they had to describe, this one's really good for your ELL students, is they have to describe it to a student who can't see it, and then the student has to draw it, which is really fun. Really works on language.